spiel on Regional Development Australia, for those of you who don't know, and for those of you who do, I really apologise that you have to listen to this again. Yes, I am looking at Camille, who has heard it plenty of times. So Regional Development Australia is partly funded by the Department of Infrastructure, so federal government, and they have 52 RDAs across all of Australia, so pretty much every piece of Australia is mapped out. And each RDA has an independent board that decide what they believe are the priorities across their region. But there is a charter under our federal government funding that we also need to follow. So who we are and what we do, we are all of Darling Downs Southwest. So it's pretty much everything west of Southern Downs and Toowoomba and Western Downs. So a very small 23% of Queensland we represent. And I'm never allowed to say that in front of your federal member, David Goodproud, because I think he has slightly more area than that. So it's quite a big space. We have 10 regional councils, 7 state members and 2 federal members across our region. And under our Department of Infrastructure funding, we are the independent organisation that can help coordinate communication and activities between state, federal, local, business and industry and community. So, you know, rather long list of key stakeholders in amongst all of that. So under our charter, so the Department of Infrastructure Charter, there are 3 overarching priorities. One is to improve access to funding and grants. So that's what tonight's about. It's making sure that we get more information around ID profile so that you guys can make better decisions and use data when it comes to applying for grants and funding. So tonight really helps us, you know, do number 1, which is improving access to funding and grants. We recognise that saying we feel and we think that this is a pretty project is not going to cut it, and you need data to back up your applications and your business cases. So that's why we fund partly ID Profile, your local council. So Maranoa Region Council fund the other component to it. And we do that because that data is publicly available, and that's what Kat's going to take us through tonight. We also do have on our website a summary of the grants and funding that's available across our region, and we update that every month. So keep an eye out for that, and a slide a bit later gives you the link. But it's a good little tool for you to use to go through and have a look at what grants you can access. Our second priority is to progress more projects across the region. Now, some people say to me, well, isn't that the same as number 1? And it's not really, because it's not just a lack of funds that can stop a project from progressing. It could be that the right stakeholders aren't playing together, so we can come in as an independent organisation and help facilitate those conversations. And maybe that there's a barrier in your way, and we will assist and advise around trying to clear that barrier for you. Or it could be a multitude of reasons. So access to projects is a number 2 under our charter. And the third one is communication back to the federal government. So we've never seen the RDA network used as much as what happened during COVID. So we report to Minister Nola Marino. She's an assistant minister and she sits under McCormack. And during COVID, we had 3 teleconferences a week with Minister Marino, and she was certainly feeding back that information through to different departments of the federal government. And we've seen some of the early changes that happened with COVID, and also some of the things that are in this year's budget certainly came out of the RDA network and those meetings with the minister. We're now on weekly teleconferences with the minister, so if there's something that you think is worthy of feeding back, we are a conduit for you, so please use RDA that way. Each RDA has different priorities though, so for Darling Downs Southwest, our board of volunteers have set up 4 portfolios. One is investment attraction for the region, and we co-chair the trade investment group with Trade Investment Queensland for this region. Another is employment and skills, and if you know of a business that is after staff at the moment, we have got a virtual jobs fair happening on Tuesday, November the 17th. So on our website you'll find information about that, or feel free to just shoot us an email if you're a business looking for staff. Our third portfolio, not in any particular order, is value chains, market development and logistics. So for this portfolio, we obviously look at projects that have a very big, broad appeal and effect. So usually not something that's only going to affect one council area or one town. So we look at things like inland rail because the Fallon line and the Cooley line will benefit from that. We want to make sure we do. Another one is digital connectivity, for example, because it affects all of Darling Down Southwest. So that's what sits under that portfolio. And then innovation, entrepreneurship and disruption. With that, we leverage off some of the great stuff that's happening across your region. So for here, Maranoa, your BEP is a great group, and we leverage off some of the activities and help coordinate some of those, and get involved there. So that's the portfolios. Usually in my slides, I tell everyone about Economy ID. Now, today you do not want to listen to me talk to you about Economy ID or ID profile, as it's commonly known. I am not the guru, but Kat is, so we're going to let her talk about that. And the last one I just want to touch on is that grants and funding portal. So if you go to rda-edsw.org.au, at the top, you will see a little tab that says funding. You drop down onto that and there's a whole list of grants that are available that you can scroll through. If you are a business, there is the innovation doc. For those of you who are here physically, we've got a hard copy. And we will email out a copy with the slides for those of you on Zoom. But the RDA DDS, the innovation doc, which we'll send through, actually summarises up the state grants and programs and the federal grants and programs that are available for a business. So business grants are very different to not-for-profit grants, but on that tab that you can see on your screen at the moment, you are able to see a summary of both business and not-for-profit. So there's arts, tourism, community, that's all on that tab as well. But the innovation document is a very good summary for the business grants that are available. Not all of them, because they sometimes open others, so the others are on that funding portal on the RDA website. Okay, that is it from me. I'm going to try and change my share screening now and let Kat share hers. But feel free, if you've got any questions that are particularly pertinent to RDA, my email is direct at the RDA website then. Or all of you should have Tim Smith's contact details, which is the admin at, and that's who you would have received your information from tonight, about booking in for tonight. I am now going to hand over to Kat. So Kat, that's on the big TV, but it's not on our Zoom screen. The other way to do it would be email it to me and I'll share it online if that TV screen is a problem. We have this fun time, and we had it in Dolby, of sometimes trying to present face-to-face and do the Zoom. It doesn't like both. But we find ways around it. It just means you may have to have a cup of tea, or a lot of people here in the room need to eat sandwiches. We have some sandwiches for them. So give us a second and we'll see. Yeah, it's on that TV, but not on here.
Yeah, it's not here.
All right, you want to email it to me? I'll share screen on here.
Yep. Hold on. How's that?
Yes. Try tapping through it. Oh no, it's still not on here.
No, not on there. Let me see if I go to Zoom and go share screen. Is that better?
Yes, I think you've got it.
Perfecto. Okay, now I'm going to go slideshow.
So just starting to screen share. Yes, we got it.
Is that working?
Yep, I can see it on my Zoom. So,
how are we going?
Diane, you're the person I can see. Diane, put a thumbs up if you can see now the ID profile, orange and white screen.
So is that taking up your full screen? That slide?
I can see you. Well, ones down the side, but
See the ones down.
that's fine. Got the screen. Well, at least you can see it.
Anyway, while I'm trying to get this to work, we've got a bit of a treat today because one of the things that I've been doing at the moment is going around to all of the local councils and regional bodies around Queensland and talking to them about their COVID experiences and how COVID has affected their local regions from an economics perspective. And also from a social perspective as well. And what are some of the things that communities can do in order to, try to combat some of the problems that are, that will arise due to COVID. So I'm just gonna, I don't know what it's doing. Anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you guys about the experience of Maranoa and what's happening in this regional council area. I'm just going to bring up my notes. Trudy, I might use your...
It's still showing up the video screen.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's just really good, but...
That's all right. We've got this now, Kat.
What do you got there?
Yeah. And then it goes back to that.
Screen sharing stop.
TV might be the problem.
Screen sharing is probably...
I need to get rid of that camera.
What have you got on here now?
There.
Nothing. Okay, let it.
That's what's on here. That was what's on here. You have a TV. Zoom people, we're really sorry. We're just trying to get this right for you.
Okay, maybe we can use your computer. How we're going to... I don't know how we're going to...
And do that. Right stuff. See, we've now got this. That's what you've got up there. See if you click through it, if that'll work.
I think we've been playing for a bit more fight time.
So I hope to help. Yeah.
We can never see it again.
Sure.
Otherwise, my because the phones are connected, it sets my desktop to do the set. Yes, so I don't know who's category is what's gone.
No, it's very,
So it's been very quiet though.
Why is our tech not?
It wasn't too much. It wasn't because I IT thing in there, updating, like doing something. And I went to use the phone, I'm like, why is that working? Well, it was a bit quiet.
Okay, that should be good. Yeah.
And then you get that up there.
I'm getting up there.
Doesn't matter. It just says what the next slide is.
No.
Have you moved?
See, it's too slow.
You know, as you come round to, like round into, and then you've got that next sort of corner, she's just here. And then you've got the top screen house. Yeah. And then she's.
I'm really sorry. It's just showing up something totally different to you to what it's showing on our TV here. So we're trying to clear that for you. Why is IT never easy?
yeah.
They had, they put this on, and they were like, where's this toilet? And it wasn't toilet. It was just dark, and it was lying in that intersection there of speaker in the middle of the road. I was like, shut up.
Get rid of the big screen. And then you guys can watch on the small screen with me. At least in our Zoom guys have got it.
Yeah.
I think it's the camera. The camera's slowing it down. The camera goes ridiculously slow on here.
Yeah.
Can you get rid of the camera?
We expected, and some are doing very poorly. And part of that is related to the number of cases that were, you know, in their communities, their exposure to the service sector, their exposure to international tourism, to airports, to hospitality, accommodation, food services, things like that. So there's really been this varied degree of impact throughout the community, but also our population drivers. Moving forward, you know, we're going to see a huge reduction in immigration to Australia. And with that immigration, it is in our working population. So when we look at the types of people that are coming into Australia, they're often young, bring kids, and are highly educated. So as we start to see that slow down and pretty much stop, this is going to have impacts on a variety of regions in Australia. So the virus is not yet under control. And I guess when we think about Australia and we think about our own communities, the virus is under control. We've actually contained it quite well. We had an outbreak in Victoria, but we've contained that quite well. So in terms of Australia, we're almost immune. When we look around the world, there's 60,000 cases as such per day that are being diagnosed. And we've just had parts of Europe go into their second phase of lockdown. And this crisis could go on for a long time. And the outcome for us, or the panacea, is really when are we going to get that vaccine? Which also means that we're going to be very dependent over the next number of years on tourism, on domestic tourism, as opposed to looking at international tourism. So it's a real opportunity for regional Queensland as well, much more than when other events have happened in the past. So when the world catches a cold, now the impacts of this crisis are much worse than what we saw with the GFC. And that's primarily because during the GFC, it was developed countries that the crisis hit. This crisis has hit everyone. And we saw GDP fall by about 8%, which is more than double what it fell during the global financial crisis. So the impacts are really being felt. Australia's major trading partners have been expected to contract by about 3%. We have seen some return in our international trading markets, but it's slow. Importing is slow, exporting is slow. Things have started to slow down. One good thing is because we've been immune to the crisis for this length of time, Queensland's been able to come out and recover a lot quicker than other parts of Australia. So here's what our quarterly growth in Australian GDP looks like. And you can see in the 1970s, down this period is when we had some oil shocks to the economy, but look how far we've fallen from COVID. And that's been driven by our largest states in New South Wales and Victoria primarily. They really are that economic powerhouse of the country, and we can see how much of an effect that has had on our GDP. Job assistance payments has risen to 11% and it has not fallen. Now, this is job assistance payments. So this is job seeker. This isn't job keeper. That's a different story. This is job seeker. This is youth allowance and people collecting unemployment benefits. And they're 15 to 64-year-olds, and we can see it's risen to 11%, and we haven't seen that decline as yet. We want to start to see that number fall away. Hospitality sector hit the hardest. Here's our change in payroll jobs. So you can understand straight away why our service sector and our tourism economies have been hit extremely hard by the crisis.
Kat, what date is that to? Sorry.
This date, this is from September.
To September, okay, and the one before?
Yep, to September.
September.
Yep. So these are the latest figures that have come out that we can get our hands on. Oop. So now we're talking about the Sunshine State. So this is also March to June. This is where we talk about state final demand. So our GSP is what I should call it. So you can see in Queensland, we fell about 5.9%. New South Wales and Victoria, 8.6 and 8.5%. So your exposure to case numbers was really important in determining what your economic future was going to be and how you were going to recover. We can see our payroll job impacts, and this is out to September. You can see Queensland's recovery is very strong compared to Victoria. Okay, and that has some nice implications for our state. But our unemployment is higher than the national average, and our participation rate has also fallen more than the rest of Australia. That's typical of Queensland. We tend to find that our participation rate is a lot lower than the other states, but we also tend to withdraw from the market a lot quicker when we see a recession, partly due to being a lifestyle economy. Our jobs growth has recovered to July, but we still have an extra 150,000 people currently on job seeker in Queensland. Our coastal tourism hotspots with international market reliance and inner Brizzy were hit the hardest. Any CBD, whether it's a small CBD in the likes of Roma or Rockhampton or Yeppoon or Townsville or wherever it might be, Charleville, inner cities or inner CBDs were hit really hard by this crisis, simply as we just shut down due to social distancing. So there's really some takeaways around what are we going to do in our activity centres to ensure that they recover at the pace that they need to, and that we reinvigorate those spaces as well. If you go into Brisbane at the moment, it's dead. You know, you could hear a pin drop, and it's a real worry because they're investing money into a place that we don't know how well it's going to recover. We can see here regions ranked in terms of greatest fall in payroll jobs March to April. Gold Coast, Cairns, Sunny Coast, Brisbane Inner City, Darling Downs, Maranoa's up there as well. So you can see they're in the top 5. These are the ones that fell really hard right at the start. Now we can see who is recovering. Toowoomba, Central Queensland, Moreton Bay, Brizzy East, Mackay, Isaac Whitsundays. Ag economies and mining communities are starting to recover the quickest. They're starting to revive. The agricultural sector is up, and we're starting to see lots of really nice stories of recovery in those areas. But we've still got a ways to go, and you can see down the bottom, Brisbane Inner City and Gold Coast still lagging behind. Domestic visitation to regional areas has increased substantially, and we know that domestic visitation, that's the new baby. because international tourists are not going to be coming for some time. There will be restrictions, there will be travel bubbles put in place, but domestic tourism is where we're going to see our greatest growth, and we're already starting to see that, particularly in areas like Toowoomba, the scenic rim. We do a lot of Google analytical data for those sorts of councils and looking at who's visiting their region, their retail, their parks, all of that sort of thing. And you can get that stuff for free actually, Ed, online. So you can actually start to map out what's happening in your community and how many people are visiting. And it's free at the moment. So Queensland is more vulnerable than other states to international flights. We know that. Gold Coast, Cairns, Brizzy, international flights are very strong, but we're less vulnerable in terms of our international students. So in Victoria at the moment, there are apartment blocks with empty cars and empty apartments from overseas students. So it's really interesting what's happening in some of the other states. They've got some of those things to worry about, having empty apartment blocks with valuables and things from overseas students as well. So where we're really vulnerable is those international flight restrictions, and that's going to happen for some time. Queensland will experience slower population growth and less domestic movements. However, once national restrictions ease, we think we'll start to see some domestic in-migration. So when we look at this particular chart, you can see New South Wales and Victoria are very reliant on net overseas migration. So that helps to fuel their economy. That helps to grow their economy and their base. Also, their natural increase is higher than Queensland. But when we look at Queensland, we're much more dependent on our net interstate migration. And the last time that we saw a recession hit Victoria harder than any other state in Australia, we saw a huge influx of population movers to Queensland. And we predict that we're going to see that again once the borders open. So it's really about creating that story around why people should move to a particular region. So it's a bumpy road to recovery. And at the start, we saw this huge fall due to those social distancing impacts. They had a really significant impact on a lot of our hospitality, accommodation providers, any of our service providers, even things within healthcare, you know, dental, things like that, that people were no longer able to visit those particular places. So there are a number of organisations that were affected. Then we have this falling investment and spending. So what normally happens during a recession is you have people start to peel back and people start to have less confidence in spending. So we can see household spending is high. This is the 1970s. Sorry, Ed. This is the 1970s here where savings went up. This is the GFC when savings went up. This is COVID-19 when household savings went up again. We can also see business spending on R&D is back to 2006 levels. No surprise, people are holding back. They're holding off developing that next product, or they're holding off investing in that new marketing person or that new coffee machine or whatever it might be. They're holding off those investment opportunities. So many jobs are vulnerable when JobKeeper is removed, and it'll weigh on household spending and confidence. We have about 81,000 Queenslanders receiving JobKeeper but working 0 hours at the moment. I do think JobKeeper is distorting some of the figures, but in saying that, that's the information that we get back from Treasury. So that's what we go with, and we say, okay, we need to be careful once we get around to that March period. And you can see employed but not working, Douglas, Whitsunday and Noosa, right at the top, all tourism economies. So they've got a long way to go because they're heavily dependent on visitation. Queensland GDP impact relative to Australia, we can see that the Queensland economy is expected to outperform the nation. So we're already on the road to recovery. When we look at the economics of a recovery, Queensland has already started. We're making our way down that road as we speak. So zooming in on the regional impacts, initially our largest job impacts were in the regional areas, but as we start to move through the second phase, we're actually starting to see that shift to urban and metro economies, particularly our border economies. So places like the Gold Coast, along the border of Victoria and New South Wales has really struggled as well. And we think that regional economies will also recover quicker than we'll see those metro economies recover. LGA job seeker changes. So this is our change from March to August in job seeker recipients. So we can see here, this is Douglas Shire up here in the north and Cairns. So you can see the red is obviously not where you want to be. And we can see down here all of our SEQ councils as we saw job seeker recipients increase during that period up until August. Agricultural regions are less exposed, and we're starting to see productivity levels really increase within our agricultural sector, and a lot of agricultural regions have been able to shield out a lot of the impacts of what's happened with COVID. Some of the nice things we've seen, the Scenic Rim did a Scenic Rim farm box, and they delivered during COVID this farm box to residents all over Brisbane, the Gold Coast, and heavily populated areas, which I think was a really good tool to use in order to get people to come and visit the Scenic Rim, and it worked really well because the tourism in Scenic Rim is going gangbusters at the moment. So here's a bit of a framework to understand our regional impacts. So the first thing that happens, we get those social distancing impacts. This has an impact on our international tourism destinations and any activity centre wherever you are in Australia. Activity centres were impacted very heavily, and you'll see, I just visited Cairns recently, and walking through their central district, you can see their, empty shop fronts, closed businesses, boarded up businesses, that sort of thing, as they wait for the return of the domestic visitor. Falling investment of spending, this has an impact on export economies, population reliant regions, ag regions, drought and bushfires. And there's the long run damage and opportunities as well. So really thinking about skills and training. What does this mean now for people moving forward in their jobs with this increase in technology like you saw tonight? It's not that easy to just pop on and do a Zoom and things like that, but it's thinking about how we can bring people along for that journey. Entrepreneurship is going to be really important. So ensuring that we're still creating new business opportunities in our region, so that we're able to capture those skilled workers. In Cairns at the moment, one of the things the council is doing is they're doing a study or a report to council on workers that can move to the region that don't need a job. So people like me, I can work from anywhere. I can work from, you could put me anywhere, I could work from there. I really just need access to a decent airport to be able to travel around for my job. But if I moved to Cairns, they wouldn't need to find me a job. I just need to be able to go there and set up shop, and I'm able to live and work in that region. And Cairns has decided they want to target those people to move to a lifestyle destination to be able to carry out their work from home duties, which I think in the environment that we live in is a good opportunity to at least explore. So the Maranoa recovery, how is the Maranoa performing? And we can see this is Maranoa prior to the COVID health crisis. So we can see 17, 18, 19, 18 to 19, we had a bit of a fall away, but we had this really heavy period of growth between 2017 and 2018. So when you compare it to 2016 and in the past, the last 3 years haven't been too bad. Now, the Maranoa industry is less vulnerable to COVID-19, which is great. And you can go through and use Economy ID to look up some of those variables and say, how exposed are we to this international crisis compared to other regions? And we can see that in Maranoa, we're not necessarily as exposed as other regions. Much more heavy reliance on ag, mining, construction, as opposed to things like accommodation, food services, hospitality, retail, that sort of thing. So we can see Maranoa was not hit as hard as the rest of Queensland. And we can see here, when we look here at your GRP change, okay, your GRP change, we are comparing September of last year to September of this year. Okay, so this is pre-COVID, this is after COVID. Okay, so what this is telling me is that even despite COVID, you've grown 1.1% on what you had September last year. So the economy is performing well. When we look here, Queensland as a whole has fallen 3.1% compared to September of last year. When we look at our local job change though, we've had a 3% decline on September last year. Now, your local jobs are your pot of jobs that you offer for everyone inside and outside of your region. So those jobs could be FIFO jobs, drive-in, drive-out jobs. They could be jobs, you know, that are work from home, whatever it might be. They are the pool of jobs that are offered in your region. They've fallen by 3%. If you didn't have JobKeeper, they would have fallen by 6.2%. Okay, does that make sense? This is compared to September last year. So some of this may have already happened regardless of COVID. This is just showing what other potential impacts COVID would have some form of impact on those figures. Employed resident change has grown by 0.9%. So some of those local jobs might have left the region, but they might have arisen in a different format. So you've got residents taking up some of those jobs. So we can see that has actually increased by 0.9% September to September. Okay, if you didn't have JobKeeper, it would have fallen by 0.8%. Okay, so JobKeeper is keeping alive some jobs in the Maranoa. What that looks like, we can break it down by industry, but we can't really determine whether or not those people, when JobKeeper gets taken off the table, what's going to happen with those guys. We can see here, this chart's actually almost flipped. So where we're pointing downwards here, that's actually a positive trend. So employed residents and GRP, we've had growth since September last year. And when you compare that to regional Queensland, Australia, Maranoa is in a pretty good position. Okay, our local jobs though, we're still in the negative. So let's have a look at what's happening. So we've got some industries finding strength. We know ag and mining is up. Healthcare and social assistance has found some strength. That's September quarter compared to September quarter last year. Electric, gas, water, public admin, education and training. There's a number of industries there that are providing some strength to the economy. Maranoa local jobs compensated by JobKeeper payments. So we can see here healthcare and social assistance. I talked a little bit about before. People go, well, how come people in healthcare and social assistance, how could they, you know, be put on JobKeeper? Well, there were some places that just had to shut down, different levels of services. There's a lot in that category. So we can see healthcare, social assistance, accommodation, food services, retail trade, education and training, and you've got your numbers here, guys. So you can see there's about 75 in healthcare and social assistance that are being kept afloat. And as we go through the rule changes of JobKeeper, we'll see those figures change again. So here's our increased number of job seeker recipients. So this is where we start to talk about unemployment benefits and youth allowance. So here, this is for all of the regions, okay? So we've got Balonne, Gundawindi, Maranoa, Merway, Peru, Quilpie, Southern Downs, Toowoomba, Western Downs. We can see there, all of them had an increase from March through to September of people receiving job seeker benefits, okay? What we want to see is that trend to start to be reversed. So let's have a look at what's happening. Well, let's go back. We've had some recovery since July in Maranoa. So we've had a small amount of recovery. Some areas we've actually seen some growth. Quilpie and Peru, Balonne, we've seen some growth in people during that period, July to September, accessing job seeker benefits. So it's a bit of a different, almost two worlds colliding here, but we can see some return here in Maranoa. That's really important to continually see that trend coming back. And this data is updated monthly. Okay, so the October figures should be out shortly. So our move to recovery. Opportunities, I won't run through this side. Opportunities, tourism plans. Absolutely targeting that domestic tourist. They are on their way, they are itching to get out of Victoria and New South Wales. Caravans are a year-long wait. You know, people are desperate to get out and visit Australia, and this could be for a long period of time, for an extended period. Activity centre strategies, how to deal with potential higher vacancies, also just those reactivations of getting people coming back to the city centre again. Infrastructure projects are going to be highly competitive, but they're going to be out there. There's going to be opportunities for infrastructure projects. opportunities, I should say, remote working. Remote working is really important. These co-working spaces, the ability to be able to have knowledge outposts and things like this in your community to service those people that are working from home. They're going to be a core part of your community going forward. Ag, food, local manufacturing, improving our supply linkages. That's really important as well. Helping our manufacturing guys navigate this period of uncertainty where it's difficult to get raw materials in some instances, and things are a little bit slower. Transport, logistics, skills development, changing demand, thinking about what are the new skills for the future. Now that we've been through this period, we can see this change in some of the skills that are going to be required, you know, for different businesses, healthcare, social assistance, councils, all of that sort of thing, all of this Zoom technology. I mean, you look at tonight, you almost need an IT expert everywhere you go. Mental health programs supporting disadvantaged groups, so youth, females, Indigenous. Youth and females in particular have been hit really hard by this crisis because a lot of them are employed in those sectors that will hit the hardest. So it's really important that we consider those guys moving forward. Now, does anyone have any questions on that data? I know I went through it quite quick, but I just wanted to give you a bit of a snapshot of what's happening for Maranoa.
In the chat here for the Zoom guys, I did let them know that they will get a PDF of these slides.
Yep.
So, but I didn't let the people in the room know. You will get a PDF of the slide. Excellent. You will get that data. And no photographic memory.
Yep, I've got no questions. There's no surprises there at all, really, about Maranoa.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's performing well. Is my screen coming up here? Let's wait and see.
Not too bad.
As you are screen sharing.
How you got it up there first and then screen share? Do we try that again?
Stop sharing it and then go.
So Zoom guys, what we're going to do is Kat is now gonna
Try this.
take us on a tour of the actual ID profile. So, you know, who's familiar with the ID profile portal? You've all been and had a look at what's publicly available. How about for those on Zoom, down the bottom, there's a little reactions thing, and you can do a little thumbs up like that on the reactions tab down the bottom. If you're familiar with navigating the ID profile portal.
I can't find a reactions tab, but no, I'm not.
That's fine, Diane, thank you.
Yeah. Our reactions things have disappeared, Trudy, but yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with it, but it'd be nice to have a bit of an explanation of how to analyse, I guess, the data that's in here.
Excellent. All right, so Kat's going to take us on a little bit of a tour through it, and we've got screen share happening on my version of Zoom, so unless you let me know those on the Zoom call, I'm going to assume that we're looking pretty good, and I'll let Kat take over and take us on a tour through. Look, if she had to take us through all the data that's available on there, we would need a couple of days. She's going to take us through some of the main pieces.
Awesome. Okay, so RDA Darling Downs and Southwest Region subscribe to two tools with ID. The community profile, which is the red profile, and it looks at everything about your community. So it talks to me about your age profile in your community, what type of dwellings they live in, how educated they are, all of those sorts of things. And all of that rich information comes from the census. And the reason why that information is important is because it provides the basis for looking at your community and be able to try to work out what projects, what possibilities there might be for the future for this region. It also starts to touch on things like what are some of the challenges that we might see moving forward that we are able to address through changing policy, a grant, or supporting local people. So the first one I'm going to go through is this red tab called Community Profile. And when we look here, we come down and it talks to me about the RDA, Darling Downs and Southwest region. I get a map of the region. And then when I move down to the bottom, I get what I call my menu. And this menu of items tells me everything that's in this profile. So if you ever get lost, go directly to the bottom of the page and you will find this menu and you can say, okay, the thing I was looking for was the highest level of schooling. The thing I was looking for was my worker's place of residence. So it's really easy to use that part of the tool and say, okay, what am I trying to answer? What am I trying to find? Down the left-hand side, my left-hand side of the profile, you'll be able to see all of these different headings. You've got population highlights, about the profile areas, population, how old are we, who are we, what do we do, how do we live, all of these different topics that you're able to investigate and use as part of your documentation to support your grant or funding application as well. So the first thing I'm going to look at is population highlights. And the reason I do that is because if I haven't visited a region, and I grew up in Toowoomba, so I kind of know this area, but if I haven't visited an area, I can come on here and I can straight away look at my population highlights and get an immediate feel for what that community is going to look like. If you come on here at the moment, it's set to RDA, Darling Downs and Southwest, which means it draws in all the data from that region. What I want to do is I want to come down here to Maranoa Regional Council area and just draw in that data from Maranoa. And if we move down, we can see we've got 12,665 people. So I'm thinking, okay, it's a smaller location. We've had some population decline over the last couple of years. We can see our median age compared to regional Queensland and Queensland is quite young. We've got a higher proportion of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander. You know, we've 27% couples with children, so it's not too dissimilar to the rest of regional Queensland. And then we can go through and have a look at all of these variables, and I can straight away get a feel of what might be happening in this community, right down to how many homeless people possibly could be living in the Maranoa council area. So that's the first thing that I'll do when I visit a community. What I can also do is I can export that page into a PDF. So when I export that file, I send it to my email address and it'll come to my email. And I'll have a page full of information from Maranoa Regional Council area. When I move down here, guys, so I'm going to move relatively quickly, so just try and keep up. I'm going to move down here now and talk about how old are we. This is a really important part of your profile. Understanding how your age groups are shifting and changing and what your dominant age structure is really important. It's important for understanding what grants you should be going for, what opportunities there are in the community, what sort of parks, gardens, reserves, community centres, internet connectivity, safety, all of those things that need to happen in your community to cater for your different age groups. And we can see here when we move down, I've got Maranoa Regional Council area. Next to that, I've got my benchmark area. Now, it's really important if you are going for a grant opportunity with the state government, you will need to change that benchmark area to Queensland. If you are going for a grant or funding opportunity with the federal government, you will need to change it to Australia. And the reason for that is because they want to know how you compare to either the rest of Queensland or the rest of Australia. Okay, so today I'm going to choose Queensland. We've got our information on where our question comes from. So derived from the census question, what is the person's date of birth? You always get these data tables up the top. Okay, so this is my full data table. It tells me exactly how many 0 to 4-year-olds live in my community, 5 to 9-year-olds, 10 to 14-year-olds. It tells me all of those exact figures. I don't necessarily live in the data tables. I come straight down to the charts because I can look at it, I can visualise it, I can see straight away what's happening in your community. And we can see here our 0 to 9-year-olds are our dominant age structure in the Maranoa area. We've also got this other proportion of 25 to 35-year-olds. They'd be having these younger people. So we can see a younger community. And we start to fall away up here. Through here, our 60 plus. But what we want to look at is not just where we're dominant. So we're dominant in those younger age groups, but where we're seeing our greatest amount of change in terms of our growth in population is in our ageing. So it's really important then to make sure that, well, is our healthcare and our social assistance care keeping up with the change in our population? And so we can see straight away that we're shifting towards more of that ageing in our population. And we can see our younger people moving out, which is something we need to consider. How do we keep those people in our community? When we move down, we always give you this information, dominant groups and emerging groups. So it's important to understand the difference. So dominant groups are really about who lives in our population, who's living here now. Emerging is who are we seeing come into our community? How is our community shifting and changing? And both of those things are really important for decision making.
So can this be broken down further than Maranoa region? Like, can it be broken down to town specific?
Not within Maranoa. So that's a different module, but that it can happen. But for this instance, it's broken down from the RDA high level and then broken down into those council areas. So when we come through here, let's then go to, so we've looked at how old are we, and that's really, really important for you guys. Now we want to have a look at our ethnicity. And this is something else we're seeing some real shifts in communities throughout Queensland. We've always seen it throughout Australia and in our southern communities. They're much more culturally diverse in some areas, whereas here we're starting to see those shifts now. So we can see 7.1% of people in Maranoa Regional Council area were born overseas compared with 21.6% in Queensland. And when we come down, we talk about our total overseas born, birthplace ranked by size, Philippines, New Zealand, United Kingdom, India. We can see here this real predominance in our Filipino community, New Zealand, United Kingdom. And we come down, let's see where we're changing. So whilst we're dominant in terms of our Filipino population and also our New Zealand and United Kingdom, where we're seeing our greatest change is in our Indian population. So it's thinking about what does that mean for our delivery of communications? What does this mean for our serviceability for those communities? What are the needs of those communities as we start to see them come into our community? How do we make them feel welcome? How do we assimilate them into the area? And when we're looking at this, these are relatively small numbers. It's when we start to go through census periods and we go, wow, this is really shifting and changing now. In 2008, Cairns Regional Council provided disaster management information in 2 different languages. They now provide it in 12. So it's really interesting to see that shift in a 12-year period around how they provide information to their community and how they use this tool to target different languages. So that's our birthplace. The other thing we can do is go to our language spoken at home. And we sort of drilled down in this today when we were in the Western Downs. And we come down here, I'm going to go straight down to my charts and we can see language spoken at home. Our dominant language spoken at home, Filipino, Punjabi, Mandarin, Hindi. So we're talking about all of those languages, Asian languages coming into our community. And this is where we're seeing our greatest change, Punjabi, Mandarin, Hindi, even Spanish. So it's interesting to see how that shifts and change. And after the next census period, which is next year, so on August, the first Tuesday in August next year, we'll sit down and we'll do our census and then we'll have those figures come out and we'll be able to have a look at this and see how that population has shifted and changed in that period. Once again, guys, you get this dominant and emerging groups. You can use that information in grant and funding opportunities, whatever it is, that information is yours. Okay, so it's about using this data to be able to say, okay, maybe there's some, you know, opportunity here for a particular event, a multicultural event? Is there an opportunity here to be able to look at skills development in our ethnic communities? You know, there's different ways of being able to use the data to help us to understand or help us to look for opportunities out there as well. So the next thing, what do we do? Okay, we've got our employment service industries, occupations, volunteering, domestic work, care, childcare. So there's a whole range of things. I'm not going to go through our employment information simply because when we get to economy ID, you'll be bombarded with employment information. What we will go to next is how do we live? So let's go to our household summary. So 27% of households were made up of couples with children compared to 28.7% in Queensland. So let's come straight down to our data tables, our charts. And we can see here, similar to Western Downs, we're dominant in terms of our couples with children. And we've got those couples without children as well, and lone person is quite strong, particularly when we compare it against Queensland. And where we're seeing our change in our household type. Now, this is really interesting because when we think about what sort of properties we develop or what sort of housing developments we want in our community, we always think we tend to, you know, be fixated on that 4-bedroom home, the 4-bedroom home that we build on the, you know, 1,000 square block or whatever it might be. Here we can see our greatest change in our households has been in lone person. So it's thinking about, is it adequate to be building 4-bedroom homes when the greatest increase we're seeing is in our lone person households? So it's thinking about how we can match our development and what we're delivering in our community with how the community is changing as well. So once again, guys, you get your dominant and emerging groups. You can export each of these charts to just on their own. So if you want to show your manager or you want to put in a grant and funding opportunity, look, we want to explore different housing opportunities or aged care housing or whatever it might be. These are some of the stories that you want to tell, is to be able to say, okay, well, look, the reason why we want to have a focus on social assistance services because we're seeing an ageing in our population. We're also seeing growth in our lone person households, and we want people to age in place. Therefore, we want to be able to contribute to our community by providing great social assistance services and an aged care facility. That's the sort of, this is how we start to tell some of those stories. So let's have a look at our household size. So when I look at this and I go, okay, I can see this increase in lone person household. Let's have a think about, well, what does it mean in terms of household size? So let's go straight down to our charts and we can see 1 and 2 person households is where we're very dominant in this region. Let's come down and see where we've changed our 1 person household. We've still got these 4 person households in here, not too many, but we have seen an increase of 14. We can see our 2 persons has decreased, but we can see there's this increase in 1 person households. And really thinking about what is that 1 person household? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's just ageing households. It might be young people who decide to live on their own. It may be FIFO workers, that sort of thing, that are coming into the community and living on their own. Once again, guys, you can export that entire page as well. So the other thing in how do we live is we can look at our dwelling type. So we've seen now what we're looking at in terms of how we're living in our households. Now we want to have a look at, well, what is the dwelling type that we actually offer? Okay, so we see our question derived from the census. Dwelling structure is derived from the ABS address register. And then we have census field officers that actually go around and help to depict what sort of structures and densities you guys have in the community. So we can see here just from the numbers, you know, separate houses is our predominant strength. We've got a little bit of medium density there. Let's come down and see, we can see separate houses compared to Queensland is very high. You're looking at about almost 90% of your households. as a separate house. And we've got this little bit of medium density down here. Down here, some of this caravans, cabins, houseboats might be people that were here on census night, given that it was August. We tend to find that in some of our northern and western communities. And here's our change in our dwelling structure. So it's interesting here, we can see, even though we've had our population change in terms of our household size, we haven't seen that reflected necessarily in what our offering is on the market. So some of these separate houses might be just 2-bedroom homes. So it's thinking about, like, how do we connect these lone persons or these aging in place with the appropriate accommodation to, you know, support their, you know, them living in the community long term. So once again, guys, dominant and emerging groups down there as well. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to move to, we've got these other profiles on here, Indigenous profiles, which gives us our key statistics of our Indigenous population. Just going to make sure my computer doesn't run flash. So our key statistics here in our Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander population, we can see you've got your Indigenous population, how many males and females. Now, this is for the whole of the RDA area. So you guys must have an Indigenous profile for RDA groups. Yeah? Sorry? You've got an Indigenous profile just for RDA. So that just talks to me about how many Indigenous people are living in the RDA DDSW region. So it's another good one if you guys are looking at funding around Indigenous funding. So if there are categories where you need to showcase how many people are employed, you know, how many people you could employ from the Indigenous community, this is the sort of data that you guys will be using. This is how many people live in the RDA Darling Downs Southwest region and are Indigenous. So it's important to have that information for your grant and funding opportunities. The next one, guys, is our job seeker. So I showed you before that job seeker data, okay, and it talks about from March to September, okay, and it gives us our numbers. So we can see here 297, 537, you know, 612, 299. So you get actual figures of people that are on job seeker benefits at the moment in your region. When we move down here, and this is going to be really important for your grant applications over the next 3 to 6 months, because you can actually showcase and talk about how many people in your community are accessing benefits. And if you want to create new jobs, if you want to talk about skills and training opportunities, this is the data that you're going to have to use, because it's talking about how do we get people off job seeker back into jobs in our community and actively, you know, pursuing local employment instead of staying on job seeker payments, which can sometimes get a little bit too cozy. So this is going to give you those real numbers. So we'll have the new figures. October 2020 will be updated shortly, and you guys will be able to see how you're tracking in terms of getting people back into employment off job seeker. The next thing I want to show you, or the last thing on this particular page, unless anyone has any questions, is you can actually get area reports. So if I click on downloads and I go to reports, I can create a report for any local government area within the RDA Darling Downs and Southwest region. I can also create one for RDA Darling Downs and Southwest region. I can also create one for the Southwest Red region. Okay, so you can come on here and you can select Maranoa and say, I want population summary, I want the ethnicity, I want education, disability, my household summaries, income, etc., etc. And I move down here and I put my email address in and I send myself that report in a PDF or a Word document. Okay, so all of those variables that I just talked to you about and all of those topics, you're able to just print them out and have them in one document. Okay, so it's a pretty handy little way of doing things. You can also send it to yourself in Word and take out any of the stuff that you don't need. Okay, so if you want to create a community profile, super easy through here and put it on your website. Okay, so you can create your own profiles of what's happening in your community and it'll show change and everything. Okay, so that's the community profile. I know I went through that really quickly, guys, but does anyone have any questions on any of that particular data or wants to explore anything else?
The only question we had online, which is about probably both the community and the economic profile, is exactly which elements of ID profiles data is different to ABS. I know ABS is one of your sources. What's the stuff that's different?
So the community profile, a lot of this information is from the ABS, almost all of it. It's just the way that it's packaged that's different. So I guess the beauty of the community profile is that it prevents you from having to sift through catalogues at the ABS. So it just packages up data to be able to say, well, this is how, this data is important because of these things, because we can see the change and we can see the dominant features, that sort of thing.
On the other thing too is the export,
yes,
and the way it's then in a report.
And all of the data on any of our sites always has a source. So you can have a source and you can go back to that catalogue. So if you want to go back to that ABS catalogue, you can go and explore that catalogue. But as I say, the beauty of this package is it allows you to view data in a less complex way. As I say, I don't live in the data tables. The boys at work will live in the data tables. I like the charts because I can automatically see exactly what's happening in the community or in the industries or whatever it might be. Okay, in the economic profile, that's a whole different story. So the community profile is primarily made up of data that comes directly from the ABS and primarily data that comes from the census. When we talk about the economic profile is updated yearly. So it's updated every November for release in February. So it's a really important time, that February period, to look at your data and be able to say what has changed over that previous year. If we implemented a policy to reduce infrastructure charges, the council, for example, said, well, we want to reduce infrastructure charges to get more building approvals in, to get more people working, to get the construction sector going in 2020, you would expect to see that in your February data. So that's when the next data drop will fall. It comes out yearly. You will be able to look at all of your data across that year, all of your industries. So it's a really important time for councils to really sit down and review. It's an important time for businesses to review what's happened and what's changed and shifted in your local economy. That data comes from a variety of sources. So it doesn't just come from ABS. It comes from the labour force survey, it comes from household expenditure survey, it comes from the ATO, it comes from tax returns, it comes from, now we've got information on payroll data, which we never had available to us previously, but because of COVID, they're releasing more data sets. So we've got all of these import-export data, we've got all of these data sets that come into play to be able to create an economic profile for your particular region. Okay, so when we go to the home page, very similar to the community profile, can move down here. We've got our key statistics, so our GRP, our population. This is all for RDA DDSW. I'm talking about right now. We've got our local jobs and our employed residents. So we can see that we're importing skills into the RDA Darling Downs Southwest region every day for jobs. We've got 31,371 local business, and our largest industry is healthcare and social assistance. Once again, down the bottom, guys, you have this menu. Okay, so when you come to this menu and you say, okay, I can't remember where Katrina talked about gross regional product, or I can't remember where she talked about whatever it might be, local employment, you can come down to this menu and you'll be able to easily find it. For example, if I hover over gross product, I can click on gross product and it will take me straight to this page. When I come down here, this is my gross regional product for the Darling Downs Southwest region. I don't know why that's not loading. I'll try doing a drop down and put Maranoa. And we can see there, that is the information that I had in my presentation. So straight away, that's a tool that you guys can use. I just click on here and go copy and put it straight into a presentation. So it's that simple. So if you're giving a presentation, whether it be to council or your employer or the chamber or your local businesses, that's how you would do it. You would take out some of this data and say, I want you guys to have a look at what's happening in our local economy. So we can see here, there's lots of different ways to display it. So there's our cumulative change in gross regional product compared to Queensland. And we can see in 2016 to 2017, we had some really strong growth, but we started to fall away and we're starting to come back in line with Queensland. When we move down here, here's our annual change in gross regional product, and you can see how that is bouncing around. So really thinking about how we can flatten out those curves. And here's our gross regional product in terms of our numbers. So as a council or as a local business community, it may be that you want to quote some of these figures. So between 17 and 18, it may have been an opportunity to say we had 19.7%, 19.79% change in our GRP between 17 and 18. You know, these are the industries that have contributed to that success. So we can see how we can look at our data in a different way. And when we're thinking about data, it's all about what story am I trying to tell? If you guys are trying to say, for example, you want to tell the story that, okay, we are worried because we have a number of migrants that have come to our community and they're not qualified and they're unemployed, and we want to get a grant for supporting skills development in our migrant communities. You will be able to find data that can support that story. So to be able to say, okay, well, we've got this many migrants that come into our community. We can see from those migrants that come into our community, we have 50% of those can't speak English. And you can start to capacity build what your project is and to be able to get grants and funding around that. So guys, I'm going to take you through the bits that I think are really important for you guys to know and really important to find when we get round to that next period in February about what the data looks like. Now, this data comes from November last year. So this is all prior to COVID hitting. Even though COVID hasn't really, presented as many challenges in this community as other communities, it's still really relevant to understand that this is just prior to that big national and international event that hit. So here's our local employment in the council area. So we can see here we've remained relatively static since 2017. So even though we had that huge growth during that period, we didn't have a huge growth in the amount of jobs that we were offering. So we obviously had some highly productive industries creating a lot of money, like mining, that didn't add that much value in terms of local employment in the community. We can see here, here's our annual change in local jobs compared to our average annual growth rate. And we can see here, here's our numbers in terms of what's happening in the council area. And we had a fall away between 18 and 19. So as I say, in February next year, that's when we look and we go, what happened during that 2020 period? So that's our local jobs. The next thing I like to look at is unemployment. And this is about building that story. Okay, so the unemployment rate in Maranoa area was 2.1%. So you're probably not going to use that if you want to go to a funding body and say, I feel like we're disadvantaged because the unemployment rate is very low. What we need to remember is that even though the unemployment rate sometimes in these communities shows itself as low, it does hide some things around participation, and it also, I guess, distorts the fact that when you guys have a downturn in your economy, it takes a lot longer to recover in regional areas. So we can see here, here's our quarterly unemployment. This actually gives us the numbers. So we can see 167 people in Q1 of 2020 prior to COVID. And here's all our figures as we go through, so you can get the full data table down here, right back to 2010. So that's our unemployment. Building approvals is another really important one to look at. And I mentioned to Western Downs today, when we get to February next year, this is one to really sweat on and go, if we haven't got a decent amount of building approvals in the pipeline, we could be in trouble, particularly if we're in a region where we are a bit more dependent on construction and we need those workers in our community spending their money. So it'll be interesting. That's where we got our 17, 18. So it's non-residential growth there. Interesting. And it gives us our figures there so you can see how you're tracking throughout the year. So at the moment, we're up to August, end of financial, August financial year. So we can see we've still got some periods of reporting there before we need to worry. But certainly it does give us an early indication in that February period of whether or not we need to hurry up. The next thing I'm going to move to is our economic value. And out of all of these things in the drop down, the one that I tend to choose is my value added. And the reason I choose value added instead of output is because value added really talks to me about profitability. So it talks to me about how profitable your industries are and how productive they're performing. So we can see here, let's move down and we can see between, okay, let's change our comparison year. Sorry, the first thing we have to do is change our comparison year to 17, 18, because I want to know what happened over the previous year. This will put you in a good habit for coming down and changing your comparison year. The reason why the other years are there is because there will come a time when we say, okay, we want to see how fast we recovered from COVID. So we might be putting in 2019, 20, you know, in 3 or 4 years' time. But really for us, it's about seeing what has happened over the previous year. And from 17, 18 to 18, 19, we had this decline in mining. Let's see where that's happened. Oil and gas extraction. IT and telecommunications is up a little bit. Retail trade fell during that period. And we can pinpoint where. So we can see food retailing, fuel retailing, other store-based retailing had the biggest falls. Let's have a look if that was... So healthcare and social assistance has improved during that period. So residential care services, which is good to see, considering we saw that shift in our population. Medical and other healthcare and hospitals. So you can come through, guys, during that period and say, okay, I want to see how our industries have performed. So it's interesting, we've seen fuel, food and other store-based retailing decline, but we've seen accommodation and food and beverage services is up. So it's really interesting to see the way the economy and our industries shift and move. Okay, so that one next year is one of the ones that you guys are going to want to look at, and that's your value add, productive parts of your economy. Then we move to exports. So I went to value add, now I'm moving to exports. And one of the reasons why exports has had sort of a bit of resurgence in clients ringing us is because the more things you internationally export at the moment, the more vulnerable you have been to an economic downturn overseas. So we can see here, one of the things we can do is we can break down our exports into domestic versus international exports. So if I click on international exports, can you see here, guys, I've come to export type and I move down and I click international exports. Mining had the largest international exports by industry. Okay, and during that 1 year period, we saw an increase in oil and gas extraction, international exports overseas. We also saw some growth in accommodation food services. Okay, and just little bits below. When you move down here, guys, once again, you'll see your charts. Okay, so you can see there those international exports in mining, a little bit in manufacturing, little bit in ag, and then you move down and you can see where that big change in international exports, so that heavy reliance on mining there. Let's have a look at our domestic exports. So domestic exports are anything outside of the Maranoa local government area. Go straight down to our data so we can see domestic exports, a lot of ag. Mining is still very heavy in terms of domestic exports, electric, gas, water and waste, a little bit of manufacturing. Let's have a look how it changed. We have these declines in our domestic exports. So it'll be interesting to see what this shows up next year with our growth in ag. Mining, we had a decline in domestic exports, transport, postal, warehousing, retail, wholesale. So let's move up here. I just want to have a look at had this decline in mining. So exploration and other mining support services. We still were up in terms of our oil and gas extraction. Transport, postal, warehousing, road transport fell. So it'll be interesting what we see come out of the data from next year. So that's our economic value. So we looked at value add and we looked at our exports. And once again, guys, you can break that down to all your subsectors. So if we go to manufacturing, we can break that down and see where we've been performing well and where we haven't. So you can see here petroleum and coal product manufacturing is actually up, even though there's been a fall in our domestic exports manufacturing. So it's really thinking about and really drilling down into what's happening in our subsectors. So here we went to value add, then exports. Now we want to go to local employment, and I'm going to look at my total employment by industry. And when I come down here, we're back on our 2017-18 compared to 18-19. Ag, forestry and fishing, we're up in terms of employment. Mining, we fell by 252, particularly in our exploration and other mining support services. Construction, we're up. Wholesale down, retail trade is down. So you can go through each of these variables, guys, and see where you're performing well. Healthcare and social assistance has risen here again. Medical and other healthcare services, that's very promising for the region. So here we've got our employment totals, and you can see where you're really dominant in terms of your employment structures: ag, mining, construction, healthcare and social assistance, and we can see where we've changed over time. So when we move down, guys, once again, you get your dominant and emerging groups. And you can export that entire page into PDF. Okay, you can also just copy and paste these charts below as well. I normally just click on and copy and put them straight into a presentation. Okay, so that's my local employment, guys. Industry focus is really another really good one. So this is an industry sector analysis. So oftentimes we will work with councils or work with businesses who have a particular interest in an area. It might be accommodation. It might be they have an interest in education or healthcare. When we come into this section here, we can actually drill down into those areas and have a look at who's employed there, how much do they earn, what's their sort of worker productivity, all of those sort of really important characteristics of that industry. So if I said, okay, I wanted to have a look at my healthcare and social assistance, and I'll pick the broad category, I won't drill down into a specific subsector. And when I move down here, it'll talk to me about my employment total. So there's 885 people employed in healthcare and social assistance in the region at the moment. That's increased by 68 over that 1 year period. Talks to me about my FTEs, talks to me about my output, my value add, my exports. So all of that information that we were drilling down into before, it gives me all of that information for that particular sector. Okay. when we move down, it will then talk to me about my economic output. So if this was, say, for example, agriculture, this would look very different. But here we can see majority of our healthcare sector is taken up with local sales. Okay, so that's local people. And we can see here our domestic market in terms of exports and some international out here. I'm not sure what that would be, but there's a very, very small component there. And it compares it to Queensland as well. Here's our industry contribution to Queensland. So in terms of imports, domestic, so that would be in terms of people coming into the Maranoa region to access services. And then it gives us our shift share analysis, which basically talks to me about how competitive we are and how that's changed over time. The other thing that we can do, guys, is we can say, well, I want to have a look at how healthcare and social assistance has performed over time. So here we've got, what does our industry look like? What does it contribute? Now I want to look at, well, how has it changed over time? And what I'm looking at is employment. I can break that down into output, value add, exports, all of those different areas that we talked about before. And when I move down, I'm on my employment total. I have this time series information, which talks to me about how employment in healthcare and social assistance has changed over time, which is really, really important for advocacy. Because if that scenario wasn't happening and we weren't seeing employment in that sector, as we see an ageing in the population, we would want to be knocking on the health minister's door to say, excuse me, but we have an ageing population and we're not keeping pace with the changes to our population. Our employment is not keeping up in our healthcare and social assistance services. We can then break that down for hospitals. And we can see hospitals has fallen away a little bit from 18 to 19, only by about 8 employees. That's not something to be overly concerned about. And we can see the actual time series, the annual change fell for Queensland and RDA, DDSW as well. So you can see there's different ways of being able to share your message and to be able to say, well, we're not happy, or yeah, we think this is going really well, or we think this industry is growing, or we think there's opportunity in this industry because we can see the growth over time. So say, for example, if we look at something like, let's go to food product manufacturing, because you guys have got an ag sector. So it's really thinking about what can we couple with our ag sector. And let's see how that's changed over time. So we can see there's sort of this bit of a dip in here, but we had some 2016, we had 145 people employed there, then 106, 94, and we've come back up to 109. So it's just thinking about the way your industry shift and move, and you can do that for all of your subsectors. So right through education, electricity supply, retail, the whole lot. So guys, that's our industry focus. So that's another really good one to look at for data surrounding specific industries. Then we get down here and we can look at our local workforce. Okay, so we can also look at our resident workers, which is our people, so our residents. What we can also look at is our local workforce and what are the key statistics of our local workforce. And when we come down here, we can see how many males in our workforce compared to females, what is the age structure of our workforce, what is our predominant industries that these people work in, what are our top 3 occupations, what are the, where are people qualified. There's a whole range of different bits of information that we can get for any of the subsectors. The other thing, so if we wanted to look at, say, for example, our agricultural sector, so we can see predominantly male, and we've got this high proportion of people, sort of 55 plus. We've almost got 50% of our workforce 55 plus. So it's thinking about what's our progression in that particular area as well. So that's our local workers. Then we come down here, and I'm going to just have a look and see whether we can, what information we can get on our tourism sector analysis. Sometimes some places are too small to get good, rich tourism information. So we can have a look here. Our value of tourism and hospitality is lower than the rest of Queensland. That's simply because we've got some really dominant players in our tourism industry. When you look at Gold Coast, Cairns, Whit Sundays, what this is telling me though is we've had some small amounts of growth over this period. So from 2017 to 18 to 19, we've had some nice little bits of growth in terms of our value of tourism and hospitality, as well as in our tourism and hospitality employment. So we've had some growth in our value. Let's have a look and see whether we can get some numbers around actual visitation. Okay, so see here where we get some blank tables. That's simply because they just can't generate the data. So domestic day trips, they have some difficulty generating the data. But we can see here our domestic visitor nights, 15, 16, 830, 805, 682 to 1.2 million in 2018-19. So that's some very significant growth. So you can see where that value added has come from in terms of your data. Now, before I get into the model, I'm really quickly going to show you, this is our COVID-19 quarter impacts. This is where I drew that data out of before and put it into that presentation. And you can have a look here at all of those estimates that we talk about. Now, we update this data sporadically because it's up to when data is released. It's also up to policy response, travel bubbles opening, borders opening. There's a whole range of different things that go into creating this data. When we move down here, one of the great things that you can do, I'm just going to move down to this table, is we can actually sort of take the cursor over that particular area, and you can see that local jobs change without JobKeeper. So we would have gained 125 jobs. We gained 137 because local jobs compensated by JobKeeper with 13. Okay, so it just gives us an indication of what the numbers look like when we're talking about JobKeeper. That's for our local jobs. This is for our employed residents, which are two different things. Okay. And then we come down here and you've got your methodology of how and where the data is found. So I'm going to go up here. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the economic impact model. So I've got 15 minutes to show you guys how to do this. I'm going to attempt to do this again. Is it just Maranoa and then
Regional Council, one word, no capitals.
And Trudy, is this login available to everyone?
What's bad training? We'll do it to you, yeah.
So here, guys, we're on your homepage. I'm
If
going
you ever
in.
get stuck, sorry, Kat, if you ever get stuck and you want these reports, you just can also email us. So direct the app or admin app. Usually Tim will get back to you faster because he's in an office and I'm all over the countryside. But we will run these for you and send to you. Neil knows we've sent plenty for grant applications and things. So if you can't get them, feel free to just email us. And you've got access to them all as well.
Can we turn them on permanently? What?
Without.
So we've got to link on. We've got to link on our page. We can't.
All the rest, this is the only section that's not public.
This is the only part that's not behind a password. I mean, there's an argument internal about why we should have them available, and then there's councils who are adamant we don't want this available to the public because if the public has them, then maybe they'll use them inappropriately.
Anyway,
I think it might be up to you guys. I'm not sure. I can ask.
probably no.
But I'll show you how to use it, guys. So what is important about this model is the inputs that you put into it. Okay, so the model is only as good as how you direct it, what you put into the model. Okay, and now this is for when we have projects that we are getting delivered in the community. So say, for example, we have a construction project and we've got an industrial shed being built in Roma. So I'm just going to put here industrial shed. Okay, and this industrial shed is for the food product manufacturing sector. Okay, so the value, where we go here, so what I've done is I've selected my industry. So I came down and I selected building construction because I'm building something. There'll always be a construction phase. Okay, so I've got building construction. Then my building construction project is going to be quoted in sales or jobs. Building construction is always in sales. Okay, we don't quote, say for example, if you're building a house, they don't quote you in numbers of jobs. They'll say it's 500,000, it's not 10 jobs. So we turn around and we say sales, and let's say that this industrial shed is going to cost us $6 million to build. I submit that information through the model. Now we come down to the analysis. So what I'm going to show you is the bits that you need to really look at and the bits that you will need to put into your application. Okay, so this is our starting point for Maranoa Regional Council in the building construction industry. So there's currently $62.66 million worth of output in that particular sector in Maranoa. What we do then is we come down here and we see the direct impact on the sector is $6 million. That's $6 million that it costs to build. Then we've got our industrial impact. Our industrial impact is 1.19 million. Now that's unique for this area. Now every single LGA in the country that we work with has their own unique multiplier. And the reason why that's important is because, or the reason why that's relevant is because a construction worker in Roma operates and spends their money very differently than a construction worker in Sydney, Melbourne, Townsville, Charleville, Toowoomba. Okay, so it's really important that you guys have these unique multipliers to have an understanding of what the impact is on your people. So we've got our industrial impact is 1.19. Our consumption impact is 0.38. Your industrial impact is all of those inputs you have to get to flow on through your economy. So you might need gravel, you might need steel, all of those sorts of things. You're going to need transport. The consumption impact is where those people who are working on the project spend their money. Okay, so our total impact on the Maranoa Regional Council economy is $7.57 million worth of output. So we started off with the $6 million building project. Our impact is 7.57 million on Maranoa. Then we move down here. So we've got our type 1 and our type 2 multipliers. Now the reason the type 1 and type 2 multiplier basically defines how we push this money through the economy. So it's how it moves through the economy. So it's what creates the industrial and consumption impact. That's what we call the multiplier. Okay, so we have our type 1 and type 2 multiplier. Then we talk about our impact on the Queensland economy. So the total impact on the Queensland economy is $9.15 million in output. So we started with 6 million, 7.57 million impact on Maranoa. Then we moved to $9.15 million of impact on the Queensland economy. Then we come down here and we talk about our total impact on the Australian economy, which is 11.79 million. That's because for every dollar that is spent in this region, it flows through the economy, both at a state level, because you guys have to collect inputs maybe from, you may have some stuff you need to get from Townsville, you may have some stuff you need to get from Toowoomba, you need to get some stuff from Brisbane, you may need to get professional services from Sydney. So it's all about how that money moves through the economy. When you come down here, guys, this is all of the information that you need to accompany your grant application. So impact on output, impact on local employment, your impact on value add, your impact on GRP. It generates those reports for you. It also talks to us about our employment by industry sector. So some of the grant applications that you need to fill in will say what other industry sectors are you going to produce employment in. So we can see with this building construction project, we're also creating jobs in manufacturing. We're also creating jobs in professional scientific tech services, administrative support services. So we can see straight away how that's moving through, how that money's being spent. You can go through all of this in detail and attach it to your application as an addendum or an appendix. We can see here, you can export that entire page into Word or PDF. I would suggest doing it in Word and taking out any of the information that the grant application doesn't need. Okay, so it's really about being short and focused and succinct and straight to the point and saying this is what the impacts are. There will be some times when a funding body will ask for you know, some different things that perhaps might not be in the tool. That's when you would contact Trudy and we will help you to come up with those figures. So there was a grant application, I think, maybe a couple of years ago that talked about what was the impact on Indigenous employment. And then we would take that information from your Indigenous profile, we would marry that with your industry makeup, and we would have a look at how we think that's going to impact upon Indigenous employment in your area, or youth unemployment was another one. So all those things are certainly achievable. So that's our economic impact model. Now, when we get to the operational phase, if, say, for example, this is our food product manufacturing shed, and we go, okay, we are actually going to create 25 jobs in food product manufacturing. Let's submit that through the model. Now it's going to talk to me about my impact of the operational phase of the project. So the first thing we had was our construction phase. We built the shed. This is what the contribution is going to be for that time period. Now we're talking about our operational phase and our food product manufacturing jobs. So we're adding those 25 jobs, and we can see there our total impact on the economy is 13.39 million in terms of our total impact on Maranoa Regional Council. Our impact on Queensland is 19.84 million, and our total impact on the Australian economy is 29.43. Now, I'm just reading down that one line, so I'm just here looking at output. You can also look here at our local jobs, which is obviously very important, and we can see it's 99 local jobs. So that's local jobs that are created in the Australian economy. But when we look here, we go total impact on Maranoa economy, 37 local jobs, of which 32 will be taken up by local residents. Okay, so there will be 5 jobs that will be taken up by people who perhaps might live outside the region that are coming in to take some of those jobs. So when we think about that sort of scenario, when we're talking about locals versus resident jobs, that's looking at our journey to work data. So it's talking to me about how many jobs in the Maranoa Regional Council area are actually taken up by outsiders. And in food product manufacturing and the industries that will be affected because of this new project, we can see that a number of these jobs will be taken up by people outside of that live outside of the region that may come into work in Maranoa each day.
So when we say some of this stuff, it's password protected, which is an ID profile thing. To give you an example, we did have an organisation who had access to the economic impact tools, and they sent through a thing, luckily, to ask us for a letter of support. And they had done they were constructing, well, they wanted to, they were applying for a grant to construct an aged care facility, and they said, no, we've done 2.5 million spent on aged care, this is what it is. And it was us that said, no, it's 2.5 million spent on construction. Then how many people will you employ in aged care? And they're 2 separate reports. So they would have put something in to that grant that would have been incorrect and may actually have cost them that grant. So, feel free to go, if you've got the password now, go in and use it, but I would just caution you to just really double check that you have got your data accurate, because you wouldn't want to lose a grant because of that. And it can be something that simple.
Yeah.
So that's another reason. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's our economic impact model. The last thing I'm going to show you guys is, just like the other tool, we also have this economic overview. Okay, so we can come down here and we can collect all of this information: population, gross product, local employment, all of those variables that I talked about before, and you can send them to yourself in PDF or Word. So it's a really simple way of being able to have the report on hand.
Can downloads are public?
Yes.
Yeah, so that one is public.
Yeah.
It's just that only the economic tools section that's.
It's only these two, the economic and the event impact calculator.
I'm just cautious that we're meant to finish at 8, so we've got 2 minutes left. And if anyone online wanted a question, just to really make sure that I don't miss out on you, I have put in the chat Tim's email address, so please feel free to email Tim if there's a question, or if it was something project specific, which sometimes not everyone wants to share with everyone else. You can send Tim, it is confidential if you send anything through to us. Send something through to Tim, and whatever he can't answer, we end up forwarding to Kat for further investigation. So yeah, anyone on Zoom, if you want to ask a question, feel free. And in the room, do we have any specific questions? No? Taking it in? The late night, hey? Yeah? Kat, was there any other bits that we haven't covered that you want to go through?
Just a comment, it's stunning to see the
Yeah.
power when you really delve into it. Thank you for that.
It's a very powerful tool. It's just, when I talk to people, I know it can be quite overwhelming. Think about what question you're trying to answer first, and then you can go and find the data to back it up. Or you contact Trudy and say, look, Trudy, I'm trying to find information around qualifications in people aged X to X, because that's where I want to focus my grant funding. And then she can contact me and say, Kat, is there a way of being able to break down this data? So sometimes don't get too bogged down in the detail. Think about what the question is. Think about what you're trying to answer. Think about the story that you're trying to tell. And then if you can't marry it together, that's when you contact Trudy or Tim and say, hey guys, can you help me? This is what I'm trying to say. This is what I've found out, but I'm not quite meeting the mark. And then we can go to a specifically demographics expert or an economics expert or someone internally that is going to be able to answer that question specifically for you and have it ready for a grant application, because we want to see you guys get money. That's essentially why we're here. So it's really thinking about that story.
And the other thing I would say is if it's for a specific grant, have a really good look at what is the criteria. So, if their criteria is based around, they want a project that's going to cater for vulnerable, and they want to make sure that it's going to cater for disability, Indigenous, women, then that's the data you go on there to look at and say, well, we've got this many Indigenous, we've got this many females, we've got this many with disabilities, or it might be a migrant ones. You want to go in and say, well, this is our different nationalities. Make sure you're actually addressing the criteria of the grant is the key.
Yep.
Use this data to tick those boxes.
Awesome.
No other questions? No, okay. Well, particularly to the guys that are on Zoom, thank you for hanging in there. That is not easy to do Zoom for that long. I'm going to get Kat to take her video off, so you will actually see what Kat looks like rather than just her screen. So I don't even know if we did that did that for you.
It goes on to there.
It goes on there. You'll have to go step up in front of the TV, Kat, so you can say hello to those on the call. Thank you for being so patient. As we said, feel free to send through any other questions or things that didn't get addressed.
And keep us in mind for letters of support. And if you need any of those reports or data, just get in touch with RDA. And thank you so much for being on the Zoom. And thank you to those in the room for being so patient. They've just got some more fruit they have to finish off before they're allowed to leave. There's Kat, Di and Lisa, so you can see we did have two others come and go in between, but one's been texting me and they had internet issues. So we'll hopefully send them a link and they can watch it. But thanks everyone so much, and we'll catch up soon. Bye.